Welcome to the Florida Veterans for Common Sense meeting for September 2025. So I'm pleased to announce that we have with us tonight as our guest speaker, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman. And Lieutenant Colonel Vindman is one of our heroes. And he's a retired United States Army Lieutenant Colonel who was the Director of European Affairs for the United States National Council until he was reassigned in February of 2020. In October 2019, he was a key witness before the United States Congress regarding the Trump-Ukraine scandal. His testimony revealed that he triggered the House inquiry and provided evidence that resulted in a charge of abuse of power in the first impeachment of Donald Trump. You'll probably recall the problem came about because of a July the 25th telephone call between Presidents Trump and Zelensky. And Alex said he was concerned by the call. He did not think it was proper to demand that a foreign government investigate a U.S. citizen, and he was worried about the implications for the U.S. government's support of Ukraine. By doing what was honorable, he was denied promotion and resigned from the Army. He was commissioned in 1999 as an infantry officer. He received the Purple Heart for wounds he received from an IED attack in the Iraq War in 2004. His Army career is really outstanding. He earned the Ranger Tab, Combat Infantry Badge, Expert Infantry Badge, the Parachutist Badge, as well as 4 Army Commendation Medals, 2 Defense Meritorious Service Medals, 2 Legions of Merit, and other awards. There's not many of us in our group that can say that we have those kind of awards. That's just very impressive. He also has a very impressive educational resume. He has a Master's of Arts degree from Harvard University in Russian, Eastern European, and Central Asian Studies. After he departed from the National Security Council in 2020, he pursued postgraduate studies at the Paul H. Nitze School of Advanced International Studies, and he received both a master's degree in international affairs in 2021 and his Doctor of International Affairs degree in 2022. In March 2023, along with his brother, he launched Trident Support, whose primary objective is to establish a weapons maintenance and training facility within Ukraine. He has published 2 books. One, a memoir, Here, Right Matters, and that reached number 2 on the New York bestseller list. And the other, The Folly of Realism, How the West Deceived Itself About Russia and Betrayed Ukraine. In recognition of his service and in respect for him, our group awarded him our Thomas Paine Award for standing tall in the legacy of Thomas Paine and as a veteran and patriot. And we're very honored to have Lieutenant Colonel Vindman speaking for us tonight. So let's give him a big virtual welcome. And if you have questions, please put them in the questions and answers, and we'll try to deal with those after the talk. So Colonel Vindman, thank you very much for being here. We really look forward to your talk.
Thanks, Gene. Thanks, Florida Veterans for Common Sense. It's been a couple of years since we spoke last. I could now report that I'm now a Floridian. I live in Davie, Florida. Even better that I get to talk to you as a neighbor. Um, I think Gene went through most of the biography, so I won't belabor that. I'll just talk a little bit about what I've been up to, and then I saw a lot of questions about Ukraine, and I'm sure there'll be other ones that land. Um, so after this degree and the doctoral dissertation, which was on this what the second book is about, I've been on a book tour since the beginning of this year. So the book came out in February, traveling all across the country, trying to educate, answer questions, um, remind people that there's still a very, very dangerous war. It's not that far away. It's affecting Americans, if you think about the prices of oil and gas and different commodities. And certainly our troops are in harm's way with deployments in Europe, trying to warn off Russian aggression. And I'm traveling around the country, trying to communicate about this. I run a think tank called the Institute for Informed American Leadership through the Voice Foundation, which is the nonprofit arm of Vote Vets. For those of you that are familiar with that group, we help get veterans and national security candidates elected around the country. Um, have been involved in a bunch of different work around helping Ukraine, whether that's delivering resources, providing training. My team has retrained all of you, or supported the retraining of all of Ukraine's combat medics, all 14,000. We did that because we had some donors that were interested in reduce or helping amputees. And when I started to look at the problem, it turns out that 70% of the amputations are um, unnecessary. It was just a failure of training. Tourniquets were applied high and tight, and left on for too long without transitioning to pressure dressings. And so we put together a program of instruction, a whole bunch of training aids, and proliferated that through the force. And we've seen a 75% reduction in amputations. Um, I've undertaken some drone work through my own foundation, to help deliver some capabilities to Ukraine. In general, just looking for ways to pitch in, leverage my contacts and my kind of knowledge and experience with that particular battlefield with regard to the Russians and how they fight and so forth. So it's been an interesting several years since we spoke. My twin brother, he's run for Congress in Northern Virginia, and he's my identical twin brother. So sometimes we get often confused for each other. But he's now the congressman for Virginia 7th District, one of the suburbs of Washington, D.C. Um, Freshman congressman doing really good things for the military. Um, he's on the veterans of he's on I'm sorry, on House Armed Services and Agriculture, and some of the things he's delivered for military families. When the president had this idea of mandating in-person work for government employees, it was going to have a disproportionate effect on military families, because spouses, if they want to maintain, any professional career, they have to work remotely. So he was able to reverse that particular decision. He's working on expanding the GI Bill, post 9/11 GI Bill, to make sure those benefits are extended to you know family members without incurring an additional duty service obligation. Lots of good things. My wife just recently was elected to be the chair of the Veterans and Military Families Council for the Democratic Party. So she's got purview across the whole United States, all 50 states, trying to figure out how to elevate the voices of veterans and advocate for veterans issues and military families. So that's what we've been up to. With regards to what's going on in Ukraine, certainly have been following it closely for the past 3.5 years. I think last time we spoke was obviously during the Biden administration. Uh, I would describe my efforts as failed efforts to try to encourage the Biden administration to do more. I was part of their outreach. They would talk to former officials with some expertise to try to get good policy advice, and I would try to counsel them to do more, to be less concerned about this mirage of escalation. And didn't do that. They were overly concerned about Russia, the mirage of Russia striking out at, to be frank, to strike out at U.S. and NATO, which was a non-starter. The Russians are not the least bit interested in picking that fight. They'd get their clocks cleaned. Um, but nevertheless, the administration did kind of creep and provide additional aid. We've now seen the results of 7 months of Trump administration, pretty significant reversals in both our support for our European allies, NATO, democracies, Ukraine. Ukraine is still receives, intelligence sharing, but it's really kind of metered. Uh, Weapons supplies, they're being sold to the Ukrainians or to the Europeans for the Ukrainians at a premium. If you listen to what Trump's cabinet says, so they're kind of price gouging a fellow democracy and our Europeans as they try to defend themselves. Trump has, of course, embraced um, our adversaries, traditional adversaries. We're talking about a red carpet treatment for Vladimir Putin, a war criminal that is has a warrant for his arrest by the International Criminal Court in The Hague. Um, and instead, he gives him a warm welcome, and now he's talking about inviting both Xi Jinping, the president of China, uh, and Putin to the U.S. for additional talks. You would think that he would be sufficiently embarrassed by going to the this meeting, claiming that he was going to kind of have a firm kind of hand with Putin, and then being embarrassed walking away with not just nothing, but like reversing course on ceasefire talks and things of that nature. But he's not. I mean, just days later, he pulled out a picture of himself and Putin in his office, in his Oval Office, out of the Resolute desk, and said, "Hey, look, this is my buddy Putin. He's not such a bad guy." So that's where we are. We've got troops in our streets. Um, this is working its way through the courts, but certainly the courts have found the deployment of troops certainly different in different ways illegal. We have a flotilla outside floating off of not too far off the shores of Venezuela, and a what seems like a lawless strike on a boat that was purportedly carrying drug earners, but that's not entirely clear, and Congress is not fulfilling its oversight responsibilities. So, military issues seem to be the nexus of a lot of what's going on. Trump thinks of himself as a strongman. I feel like he's actually going to, be more aggressive in employing the military domestically and overseas because he's not checked at all. And I think he was really, really impressed with Xi's parade in Beijing. It was a really nice, pretty parade with everybody marching in lockstep. And now he needs to flex his muscles. So we're going to have more of this kind of behavior. So pretty disturbing first 7 months. Um, but I guess we're, an eighth of the way there. So we just need to keep plugging away. This group, I liked what Gene was saying with regards to reaching out to your congressmen and senators. I think those are, we're obviously in Florida, so a lot of those are Republicans, and their phones ring off the hooks with the different issues, and whether it's vaccines in the state or affordability issues, all sorts of different things, infringements on VA services. But keep calling them. If you have happen to have a Democrat, call them too. Tell them what's on your mind, that you expect them to kind of act on it. If they're doing a good job, encourage them. This is my own backyard. I'm definitely trying to do a lot more. Well, I'll be circulating around the state a little bit later this fall and supporting some of the candidates running in 2026 and in the special elections. But really happy to be back with you all. And so, what could we do to protect ourselves from further authoritarian advance? I think that right now, what you see is the Trump administration targeting the vulnerable. They're going after the undocumented. They're going after immigrants. Um, they're going after LGBT community. They're going after trans community. And I think that right now, they've not seen that much in the way of pushback. We start seeing the opening salvo in terms of going after enemies with regards to this investigation into John Bolton, who was on the Trump's enemy list, just like I am. I think both John Bolton and I are both on the Russian sanctions list and the Trump enemy list. So I think that this is going to spread. I think this is going to result in larger scale protests. We've seen a couple of those unfold. that are a warning that the president is heading in the wrong direction, a warning that he's not heeded thus far. I think that we're going to see a scenario in which the pain from this big ugly budget bill is going to hit the Floridian population quite hard with regards to um, Medicaid cuts, access to Social Security because of what they're doing with the administration of Social Security, VA, impact on. We have about 1.5 million veterans in the state, and many more if you consider military families. So that's a significant number of folks that are going to have an impact on their services. The decisions being made around vaccinations. We have a large elderly population that's going to be affected. I think this is going to drive more and more people out onto the streets. So what I'm saying is that in certain regards, part of this problem is going to solve itself with more resistance building, but we also need to channel that and have leaders kind of try to kind of organize and focus people to come out and push back. And the next real major opportunity to institute some accountability would be the midterm elections. That is a moment in which we could see the House shift to Democratic hands relatively decisively, and hearings and inquiries and resistance to Trump's ideas on how he wants to use the budget, his desire to levy tariffs on mainly, it seems like more friends than enemies because Russia hasn't really been touched by tariffs, and the Chinese have pushed back on tariffs, and Trump has buckled. So that's going to be, I think, the way things are likely to unfold. So be ready, kind of get fit, get organized, get ready to do some marches, and kind of make your voice heard. Okay, let's see. Should Ukraine bomb the Kremlin? The answer is that they have attempted to bomb the Kremlin already. This just within the past couple of days, the Russians launched the largest attack on Ukraine and struck the Cabinet of Ministers building, building that I've visited on many occasions. But it was also that was in certain regards maybe one of the more legitimate targets because the other targets were um, apartment buildings, and they've gone after all sorts of civilian infrastructure, hospitals, and things of that nature. So the Ukrainians are have gone off after the Kremlin, but maybe in a more symbolic way. They're developing really stunning capabilities, low-cost cruise missiles that have a 1 ton payload in terms of explosives that have a 1,000-mile range. These are pretty robust capabilities, but I think what they're likely going to do, by and large, is they're going to go after Russian military targets, Russian military industrial base, and they're going after very, very heavily oil and gas infrastructure, and to the tune of reducing Russia's production by about 20% at this point. So it's resulting in shortages and rationing and things of that nature. So from their perspective, um, they might still go after the Kremlin, but more as a symbolic target. They're going to go after the things that are going to really hurt Russia's war effort, which is going to be what impacts the budget. So this is an interesting one. Is it possible that Trump is Putin's agent? So I've been very skeptical of these ideas that Trump is being run as a kind of witting agent. Witting agent would be somebody that's kind of manipulated based on compromising information. He's been financially compensated, ideologically maybe aligned, and he knows that he's working in the service of the FSB, KGB. I've always thought of Trump as a more of an unwitting agent, a useful idiot. because he could be manipulated based on his proclivities. He does have a similar worldview to Putin. Putin could manipulate him based on like flattery and his historical tall tales about Ukraine being the bad actor and Ukraine being the aggressor and things of that nature. Trump is kind of an idiot. He doesn't understand history, he doesn't have the background for it. So I think those are the ways that he's likely to be employed. But I find it difficult to fully explain why he's bending over backwards to the extent that he has when he's being clearly, embarrassed by Putin. He's being panned by Fox News and his supporters for being weak. So, it starts to introduce some doubt and just I kind of was more playing with this and rather than being serious, but just today I commented on this idea that Speaker Mike Johnson said that Trump was an informant for the FBI. So I kind of ran with that idea and said, okay, well, like let's look at the scenario. An informant is usually somebody that's been was a target of an investigation, was caught out, and then turned to protect themselves, so immunity. So he was obviously he could have been, in this scenario, I said, okay, so Trump was caught being a criminal or a pedophile or something like that. And he said, hey, I got this bigger fish. Let's go after him. I'll tell you all that you need to know about him. So he turns, to be an FBI informant. But in this scenario, again, uh, was he just informing to the FBI on his friends and his network and his co-conspirators, or was he also potentially an agent for the Russians at some point? If he's willing to inform against his closest networks, why wouldn't he be easily manipulated to inform or to share information about the U.S.? So again, my thread on this is it's an interesting point you make, Speaker Johnson. Now, Speaker Johnson was probably like looking to deflect. He was like likely saying, "Oh, he knew that these were bad guys, and he was providing information to the FBI because he knew it was bad guys." The problem with that thread is that Trump has been saying all along that there's nothing to see here. And then Trump and team we don't know what this guy's talking about. But let's just take Speaker Johnson's claim at face value. He's an informant. The American public has a need, deserves to know what information he was sharing. Let's go ahead and push this along. So I think that's the way I kind of look at Trump. Yeah, so I'm ready to cover this one. The Ukrainians have developed long-range missiles and drones. These are extreme long range, extreme heavy payload. They've been working on some of these things for years. Some of them are actually relatively recent crash programs, and they're producing them. They're starting to produce some of these things in a relatively robust manner. Certainly, the drones they're producing in pretty large scale. New Flamingo missile that they're producing is that a dozen or more a month, and that's a heavy payload. Um, so I think these things are going to have an increasing impact. How long will Putin be able to maintain control? Are there serious efforts to overthrow him underway? Is there sabotage in Russia to any significant extent? The answer is, unfortunately, the US and the West do not engage in the same kind of tit for tat reciprocal behavior that Russia is. Russia is conducting robust sabotage and influence operations. They have been for years. There have been, it's been kind of widely studied at this point that the Russians believe they're in a hybrid war with the US. In a traditional Cold War mindset, the US responded accordingly. But we have not had that kind of didn't have the stomach or don't have the stomach for this kind of activity, and basically have been hands off Russia to a very, very great extent. It's maybe this is a point that carries over from my book. So my book, The Folly of Realism: How the West Deceived Itself About Russia and Betrayed Ukraine, looks at U.S. Russia-Ukraine relations over the course of the last 35 years. And the basic premise is that the U.S. has been too wishful in its thinking about what could be accomplished with Russia and too fearful about holding the line, being resolved to defend our national security interest. In that same regard, we've been deterring our ability to defend ourselves, warn off our adversaries for much of that same period. So, yeah, this is an example of being justified in looking at ways to nurture opposition in Russia, but not taking that kind of action. I don't think that Putin is in really serious danger anytime soon. He's still, as strange as it is, it's not just Putin. Lots of elites also believe in this war of aggression and that Russia is an imperial power that should be expanding. And in that context, Putin is still perceived as effective and popular. You don't have anything in the way of really significant protests. And more importantly, even if you did have protests, you're in a scenario in which Putin has enormous repressive capabilities. The Federal Security Services, the FSB, the National Guard troops, the interior troops, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of people that he could apply to neutralize these kinds of protests. So, and they're not even there. So we're not in a situation in which there's really a significant threat to him. I'd say the biggest concern was obviously this Prigozhin um, Wagner instance a couple of years back, warlord, somebody that ran a military company and was responsible for thousands of troops marched on Moscow and then kind of changed his mind and he was murdered for the effort. There's questions about Russian economy. Could it collapse and take Putin with him with it? I would say the Russian economy is looking increasingly brittle. They're running a significant deficit. They've largely tapped their national wealth fund. Interest rates are sky high. We're talking about 20% rates that they were thinking about cutting to keep the economy going because you need to have the ability for businesses to take loans and things of that nature to keep the economy going, but they can't do that. They're printing money. The price of oil is down, and the Ukrainians are going after Russian oil and gas infrastructure. So this is starting to put some significant pressure. I think I wrote an article at the beginning of the year that the second half of this year would be much tougher for the Russians. The problem is it's not going to be enough to really shift the Ukrainians off. I mean, the Russians off their war in Ukraine, mainly because they're inspired and encouraged by Trump. Think about it this way. They're under pressure economically. They're not making headway on the battlefield, and we'll talk about the battlefield in a minute, but they're really not making any headway. They're taking significant losses for little gain. And under those kinds of conditions, you would start to think about like if you can't surge efforts, if you can't change the dynamic, and your idea of traditional warfare wearing down the Ukrainians isn't really working, you start to look for off ramps. But when you have Trump gifting pretty much everything that Putin wants, and including discussing the idea of lifting sanctions, breaking relationships with our fellow allies, cutting support to Ukraine, you really start to think, okay, well, the calculations have changed. Ukraine, the morale is dipping. It's unclear if the Europeans will have the resolve to back up the Ukrainians. Um, and you're like, okay, it's tough. It's tough going. We're going to stick it out. Let's see what happens next year and reevaluate then. So that's, I think, unfortunately, where even these difficulties are occurring, it still isn't sufficient to drive um, Putin to reevaluate. So let's talk about the battlefield for a little bit. Uh, it's probably pretty different. I'm trying to remember exactly when we spoke. It's been a couple of years, but it's a pretty different battlefield. Maybe was it even before the war? But it was early. The war has evolved into different phases. About 60% of what Ukraine needs is produced domestically. The other 40% comes from a combination of purchases from the U.S. and the Europeans. It's a drone war in heavy parts, meaning that drones make the battlefield transparent. Both sides could see each other's movements. A lot of strategic, operational, and tactical drone activities across the region. Um, Both sides for now seem to have adequate artillery. They're holding back their armor, largely holding back their armor in reserve because as soon as it rolls forward, it could be destroyed. Um, One of the biggest deficits that Ukraine has at the moment is air defenses. It doesn't have enough air defenses to protect its cities, and those things are going to come online too slowly, and they're too expensive. At least the exquisite capabilities that the U.S. provides, like Patriots. So the Russians are using them, and they're producing enormous numbers of what you were formerly Iranian drones, but kind of repackaged as Russian drones. So that none of that is really decisive. The events occurring at the edge of the battlefield are Russian, wave assaults, human assaults, with significant losses, taking small tracts of land, pushing back the Ukrainians, but taking enormous losses to the tune of over 1 million losses, um, killed and wounded over the course of this war. I mean, those are staggering numbers that we haven't seen in since World War II in Europe. And the Ukrainians are taking losses too, but a fraction of those losses. And the Ukrainians are likely to wear the Russians down, not the other way around. The Ukrainians have staying power. There are some interesting reporting. We'll see if it bears out, in fact, about the Russians attempting to assemble a pretty robust force, somewhere between 70, maybe 50 to 70,000. I think the numbers of 100,000 are too large to make a large scale attack. But we're talking about September, and the weather is not like it is in South Florida. By the end of September, it's going to start to get cold and it becomes suboptimal. It's going to get wet, and again, being able to advance on in those types of conditions isn't great. So I don't think they're going to have much in the way of they're none of their offensives this year amounted to anything. So it's not a recipe for a Russian victory. And if anything, like I say, Ukraine is the one that has staying power. How much is China helping Russia and North Korea? Both are helping significantly. North Korea with regards to manpower, artillery ammunition, it's meaningful. The North Koreans were the ones that were responsible for expelling the Ukrainians out of their foothold on Russian territory in Kursk. That and some supply cuts from the U.S. The Chinese are floating a significant portion of this war effort with regards to masses of dual-use technology. Without the Chinese in support, the Russians wouldn't really be able to sustain their drone warfare efforts and really significant portions of their systems. They're reliant at this point on China.
So Alex, we've got
Yeah,
now quite a few
Q&A, yeah.
questions live in the Q&A. So I know you've got a long list there, but maybe we could get first. It's from our member Cody. First, he says, "Thanks for being with us again." And then, do you get a full military pension and TRICARE for life?
I do. I was assigned to the White House just before I hit 20. Let's see, yeah, about 6 months before I hit 20 years. Um, and um, all these events occurred, right about my 20-year mark. So I was for my promotion to colonel was delayed and canceled, and there were indications that basically the Trump administration was going to, as long as they were in power, they were going to retaliate against me. So I really didn't have the option to stick around. I could have taken a kind of a quiet job someplace. I think there was jokes about, manning a radar station in Alaska at some point. Um, but that wasn't for me. I had every intention to continue to try to advance U.S. national security interests and leverage my skills. Um, but so, I mean, I left, and I do have TRICARE and my retirement.
The next one is from Jack Merriam. He says, "We need you to run for U.S. Senate from Florida." You are our first great candidate who has an excellent chance of winning. Will you run? If so, we'll give you all the support we can.
I thank you for that support. I guess to a certain extent, my challenge here is that my organization, Vote Vets, is may very well be the decisive factor in winning back control of the House. We have some superb candidates. It's a $70 million organization. We support veterans at the federal and state level. And I could either help try to win back the House or do kind of a Hail Mary and try to win in Florida. I couldn't do both in 2026. That doesn't mean that I don't see the possibility of pitching in some way in the future. I'm certainly wanting to do more. I want to do more, and I'm supporting a number of different candidates, veterans and non-veterans in the state. I fully understand that we have a pretty weak bench out there right now. We also need a hell of a lot more work um, throughout the state and in the counties to close this massive voter registration effort. Jack, do you agree to help with the voter registration effort and register, as many of Dem voters as possible? Then we could open up a conversation about, or making a run at some point. But I need your help. I need this group's help to help close this gap so we could win statewide because it's enormously challenging, and I think that's one of the things I'm focused on. Like, in addition to the national level, trying to figure out how to close the gap here and support good candidates in the state. Take that for what it's worth. It's certainly not a firm no, but it's a later. Question is magical thinking, and shouldn't we be working on climate change? I think we should be. I mean, this state in particular, with regards to climate change and hurricanes, the impact on of temperature. I mean, all these things are going to hit this state harder than other states in the union. But I think right now, as existential as this threat is, that's a generational threat, and it's something that our children and grandchildren will judge us for. I think where many Americans find themselves is the welfare of our democracy. What are we doing to make sure that we have a democracy that functions and a representation that shares our views about climate change instead of one that is looking to uh, magnify global warming, attacking alternative energy, um, eliminating the incentives for folks to look at alternatives to fossil fuels. I think that seems to me, unfortunately, as the greater urgency. And again, our children and our grandchildren will judge us harshly for this because it should be something that we're focused on. But I think we need to claw back our futures and then tackle these issues, with a greater energy and earnestness than we've done in the past.
So the next question is from Charles, and he says, do you believe with the recent public showcases of the China, Russia, India, and North Korea alliances, we should update our thinking on Ukraine and later Taiwan?
Yeah. So it's less of an alliance at this point. It's a question about this meeting, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the 80th anniversary parade in Beijing, kind of Xi Jinping showcasing his power and his military might. Um, SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, is largely kind of a gab fest. It's an opportunity to get together and maybe make some economic investments, but they don't follow through. The core of that historically has been Russia, China, and the Central Asian states, the five Central Asian states. It's expanded to a number of observers, but really not necessarily a huge amount of follow through. Because there were a large number of observers, and there was the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II, Xi Jinping had this massive, massive parade, and it probably looked more cozy and friendly. Certainly, there is, I think, this no balance friendship between Putin and Xi is legitimate. I mean, they see eye to eye on their respective national security issues. There's convergence. I think India has long been a weary of China, but it's long been a friend of Russia's also. I mean, the Soviet Union, uh, there was an enormous amount of trade between India and the Soviet Union. A lot of the hardware that the Indians employed was from the Soviet Union and from Russia, but I wouldn't say that they were super, super close. I think it's part of this is a message that the Trump administration, with its, its kind of economic attacks on India, 50% tariffs and things of that nature, it was a signal from India that instead of coming together like the U.S. administrations for last several administrations have been trying to bring India into the fold, large democracy and things of that nature, that the Trump administration is pushing them away. So I think that was the signal there. And of course, you know, the axis of autocrats, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, Venezuela, they're getting tighter. And my concern, and I've been writing about this on my Substack, if you want to kind of dive into some of this stuff more, it's at avindman.com. Um, I'm concerned about the access of autocrats. I think the fact is that they're collaborating, cooperating, coordinating, and that we have Trump as a spoiler, upsetting our relationships with our fellow democracies and our alliances, and they're likely to gain, and democracies are likely to lose. Now, if we were smart and cooperating with our fellow democracies, we would be nearly untouchable. I mean, we would have the preponderance of the military might, economic might, influence. But if we're going to be fractured, then we are a lot more vulnerable, and I'm very concerned about that.
All right, great, thanks. The next one is from Skip. He says, major changes have been made in the last 160 days to the command DoD structure. Where will these changes of flag officers be most evident in failings of programs?
It's interesting. I think, failings of programs is one factor. I'm frankly more concerned about the kinds of strain that the Department of Defense are under with regards to obeying orders. I mean, certainly they're being put in the position of obeying lawful but awful orders, right? So that's the deployments of troops in cities. Those are lawful orders, but they're pretty awful because they're being employed against cities under the pretext of states of emergency that really are non-existent, and punitive actions against democratic cities and things of that nature, to intimidate. But we also saw this. We see this flotilla off the coast of Venezuela. Uh, why is it there? There's really not a major justification for us to engage in this kind of saber rattling or kind of signal regime change. Um, but that's exactly what this administration is doing, and I'm concerned about a lawless strike on Venezuela without a authorization of military force, or even making the case to the American public as to why this is important to U.S. national security, in violation of the UN Charter and state sovereignty, um, without congressional support or action. The strike on this boat that was cruising off of Venezuela and purportedly was a drug boat. That seemed that, and I just did a conversation with a JAG friend of mine from our lieutenant days. Um, he's retired as lieutenant colonel and clerked for federal judges. Runs the National Institute for Military Justice. I mean, he described it as a singularly lawless attack without the kinds of authorizations that existed during the global war on terror, authorizations of military force, engagement with Congress. these things are what concern me. And having yes men or a military brass that's cowed and unwilling to resist these kinds of orders is deeply disturbing. Getting rid of the three-star JAGs, I think, is part of this to rubber stamp whatever decisions are made. I think the leadership at the combatant command level, the Joint Chiefs level, I don't think these are career professionals. They rose through the ranks. They've have many decades of service. They're patriots, but can they withstand the pressure and the threat of being fired or not just fired, but potentially prosecuted, and not just prosecuted, but also humiliated and being tarred in the public arena. And I don't know if they necessarily have that kind of if they desire that kind of thing. I mean, I'm a cautionary tale in that regard. Just as a lieutenant colonel, um, Mark Milley is another example. A bunch of these folks are, and you don't hear that much coming out of the corners of the four-star retired ranks that are being critical. I'm a little bit surprised. So I think the programs. That's again the far target, just like we talked about climate change. The programs, yes, it's going to undermine our readiness. It's going to undermine our ability to wage war and defend ourselves. That's, but I think I'm more concerned about how we could be in a situation where troops are employed against cities, or we have less effective leadership as Trump engages in military adventures. Um, Readiness. I mean, we're talking about thousands of troops on this border. This border security mission, uh, thousands of troops being deployed across this country, flotilla in Venezuela. These are folks that should be training, um, refitting, overhaul, whatever the case might be, in order to get ready to defend this nation in case of a war. So that's what it really I'm more concerned about the near target.
So this is a related question, which you touched on, but it's from Jeffrey. He says, are there any military leaders who will defend our Constitution against this domestic threat, Trump?
I'd like to think that in the brightest of red lines, yes. If it's a blatantly illegal order, not a huge amount of parsing, because this is where it comes down, where it gets tricky, right? You've got awful but lawful orders; those have to be obeyed. And then you have a gray area of illegal orders, but that get the stamp of approval from JAGs or from the Justice Department, whatever the case might be. Those are difficult, like arming our National Guard when they patrol the cities and things of that nature. But if it's a bright red line, go shoot those protesters, those unarmed protesters. I don't think that we have a military that's going to offer accept those orders and implement those orders. So I think in that kind of situation, we're not there yet. We're not going to have a military that attacks the population in that regard. But I am concerned about like this gray space and what could happen below that clear bright line and threshold.
Okay, thank you. The next one's from Philippe. He says, what can Floridians do to retake this state from MAGA Republicans as Democrats, independents, whoever?
So I mean, look, I don't think I'm sure I'm not sure if if everybody in here is a Democrat or independent or Republican. I could just say from my standpoint, I've never been doctrinaire about a particular political party. Certainly no friends to the Republicans nowadays, but that's not the way it's been historically for me. And I think that regardless of if you're left, center, or right, um, there are plenty of things you could do. I mean, this is an interesting state where you have non-politically aligned that really can determine the outcomes. So find those candidates that are gonna that will advance our policy interests, our shared policy interests as veterans. Um, and I think there are more this time around. Devote Vets has a enormous uh, stable of terrific candidates running. We have some really sensational folks. I mean, the first in New York, the first woman to run to be an officer to be an operator in the Delta Force is running for Congress. I mean, the most prestigious premier military unit in the world. So there are some excellent candidates out there. If you could also choose to maybe run for some of the local positions in your own backyard, pitch in with resources, pitch in with your time. I think those are all effective ways to help, and then go out and register some Dems.
This one is from Lindsay. She wants to know, is Starlink the satellite connection Ukraine uses for drone warfare, and is it reliable?
It's basically the most prolific satellite-based communication system. So they use it for communications. They have potentially access, depending on how they're what the drone is and how it's manufactured. There are European GPS guidance systems. There's ours is called GPS. So there are different tools there. I think mainly it's the most important communications platform that they use, and certainly it's the backbone of some of the information sharing that the U.S. has, includes our U.S. based GPS system.
Okay, great. Thanks. Just a couple more questions here in the Q&A. The next one's from Casey. And have you personally gone into a VFW here in Florida since MAGA has taken such a strong hold on so many of our fellow veterans? The reason he wants to know is he's been basically hesitant to go in since he's not a MAGA Republican, and wants to know why they stand behind a draft dodger. And
Yeah, I really don't have an answer to that one. I mean, why they stand behind it, Captain Bone Spurs. But what I would say is that so I've been to VFWs. Actually, I mean, I had a VFW that I'd go to relatively regularly in Northern Virginia. I have not been to one here. I also think that I live in a different area in Davie, Florida, than in Sarasota, where you all are based. So it might be a kind of a different composition. I think I wouldn't say that veterans tend to be kind of moderate, a centrist, center left, centrist. I'm sure there are plenty of center right folks there. I would say that that's a good experiment for me. I've been wanting to do something with the VFW here, including a book talk. So I'm going to look for an opportunity to do that. That's an interesting, it won't be a particularly good sample for the whole state, but at least my neck of the woods in South Florida, I'm going to look to do something.
all right, great. And then finally, the last question here at the top of the hour. It's more of a statement from Laszlo. He says, you have our vote and our total support for any and all federal or state positions you decide to run. Thank you for all that you're doing. So glad that I have the opportunity to be on this important Zoom connection.
Thanks, Master Sergeant. I appreciate it. That's I see senior NCOs about a confidence for my senior NCO is even more meaningful. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Well, we'd like to thank you, Alex, for your talk tonight. It's been very informative. I'm sure there's a lot of information that some of our people didn't know about. And the one thing that we're working hard to do, we're not partisan either, but we are anti-MAGA. We view MAGA as basically an authoritarian movement.
Yep.
And so we're doing everything we can to delegitimize them. And I just remind people to help do that, go to the petition and the letter and sign on, and that's FLVCSletter.com. So do that this evening if you haven't done it already. And then also be more active with our group. That's one thing that we can do. We're already endorsing a candidate over on the East Coast who's running for county commission, really terrific veteran candidate. So we can do those type of things as a group. And so we all need to be working harder. So, Alex, our request from you is when it's appropriate, give us the marching orders and we're ready to go.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Gene, and team. If you guys run across some superb candidates, especially veteran candidates, just flag them for me because I'm also looking for ways to pitch in and kind of bring some attention to candidates.
Bob, he says Iran has sent contraband to Russia to destroy Ukraine. Why doesn't Ukraine respond by finding clandestine ways to punish Iran?
So I think they're probably looking at the Ukrainian security services and intelligence services are very, very effective and sophisticated. Certainly, they punished the Assad regime and potentially bolstered this opposition movement that toppled the Assad regime. I think if they found a way to be effective, they would do that. They've gone after Iranian targets in Russian occupied Ukraine. They've actually killed a number of different Iranian operators. So I think they're looking for ways to be helpful.
Thank you very much, Alex. And I encourage everyone to buy Alex's books and support him. If he's on a book tour in your area of the state, make sure you turn out and support him. And Alex, thanks you so much. Good night, everybody.